Me actually meeting the Bumble date who looked great in the 3 heavily filtered pictures on her profile.
Oh God.
My ex-wife reacting to me telling her I'd been invited to a stag weekend in Krakow. And this was me when my ex-wife asked me to keep quiet upstairs while she hosted her book club meeting.
Yes, it's all coming back now. Ah, yes, I remember. Well, that felt good.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. We're going to talk about Gents'. Gents' has slammed. He's slammed scammy influencer brands. He does tend to sort of tip his toe into the sea of controversy occasionally, doesn't he, Gents'? So let's talk about it. Gents', huge YouTuber with hundreds of thousands of subscribers, fully deserved, very hardworking. I think a new video every day, if not more than that, on his channel, and he does deserve his success. Very high quality in terms of the video and the sound and everything, and he has this encyclopedic knowledge of a huge number of fragrances. Tends to gravitate towards, well, a bit of everything really, and modern stuff is featured a lot. So a very different kind of channel to me, and I do really, really respect him for his channel. By the way, guys, don't forget we've got an amazing bundle deal, nortonandwilson.com. We still have this stunning deal, $380 for all 4 Norton & Wilson fragrances. That's the brand which I founded with my partner, Mr. Wilson, and we've had huge success. Okay, let's move on. So let's talk about this. Okay. So Gents' has done a video earlier this week, like 4 or 5 days ago, about scammy influencer brands. So he means YouTube fragrance influencers who release fragrances in conjunction with a big brand, or some kind of brand out there, and put their name to stuff. And there's all kinds of different ways you can do that. So let's talk about what he said in his video, kind of having a dig, although not naming any other YouTubers or influencers out there, but maybe having a little bit of a dig at them implicitly. And what do we think about that? Okay, so let's talk about what he said. And okay, first thing to know, of course, Gents' has his own collaboration with the brand Michael Malul. I think he said he has 3 fragrances so far, and not only can you buy them online, I think they are also in bricks and mortar stores in the USA, Perfume Mania, I think it's called, and Fragrance Outlet. I think that's what he said in the video. So I mean, hats off to him. That's a huge achievement. And he's creatively directed those fragrances. So he's worked with the companies that are associated with Michael Malul or who work with him. I think he mentioned Firmenich, Givaudan and Marne. And those are very big and prestigious perfume companies with access to all the best ingredients and some great perfumers out there. And he was describing the process for him. So he is an influencer, of course, a very big one. Exactly the kind of person who might well have success with launching an influencer fragrance. So the fragrances, as far as I know, are under the Michael Malul brand. I don't know if it says anything about Gents' on the bottle or the label, but he's involved in creatively directing them. Okay, what does that mean? In his description of it, things like he'll set up a mood board, how lovely, and he'll tell them some notes that he wants and give descriptions, and then they'll go back and forth. He says he works with an account executive, you get submissions, so different people, I think maybe different perfumers possibly, forgive me if I get any of this wrong, give submissions that might suit the brief that he's put out there, and he'll go back and forth, and eventually they will, between them, come to a decision, or mainly I guess it's his decision finally, on which one he wants to go with for the release, for the brand. That is how a creative direction of a fragrance probably should work, and as he described it, it takes a while. It takes kind of months to do it. Best part of a year, I think he said in one case. So almost a year from the conception to the birth of the fragrance or the release of the fragrance. And so that's how he's done it. My brand, Norton & Wilson, whatever he's saying about these other so-called scammy brands, I don't think it's any kind of dig at our brand. I don't think he's that interested in me anyway. He may not even know who I am. But our brand has done it a completely different way in that I co-own the brand 50-50 with my business partner, Mr. Wilson. And so we raised our money through a Kickstarter fund and actually funded via Kickstarter the whole thing ourselves. So there's no other outside company involved. And I do very much put myself forward as someone who is talking to you about not an influencer brand. It's Norton & Wilson. I happen to have a YouTube channel, but it really is, I've got my own name in the brand name, Norton & Wilson, a very small, new, niche company releasing fragrances. And we would hope that Mr. Smelly and his YouTube channel will become more and more a side story in the history of the brand. You might want to check out Gravitas Essentia, released this early last year. Fantastic springtime fragrance or summertime, all year round really. It's a little bit like our original, well, it's a flanker to the original Gravitas Pour Homme, a fantastic fougere with patchouli, vanilla, spices, and this one has the addition of Artemisia bay leaf and mint, and it sort of also exaggerates the citrus notes, a bit like an Eau de Sport. There's Paco Rabanne Eau de Sport from the 80s. You could call it an Eau de Sport cousin to the original Gravitas Pour Homme. You might want to try that one out. So we're really proud of our 4 fragrances. Let's get back to the Gents scent thing then. So he's kind of talking about his way of doing it. He is working, unlike me, with the bigger company, the overarching company, but he creatively directs the fragrances, and of course he'll take a percentage of the funds, the sales for each fragrance, which he must be doing great if he's got them in bricks and mortar stores, and that's a good thing. Jeremy Fragrance launched the first big fragrance brand. That was similar to me, actually. He did it through a Kickstarter, so he actually co-owned the company, I think, with his brother. But now, Gents has noticed a trend that he ain't too pleased about, so let's talk about that. Okay. So what happens with these so-called scammy influencer brands? So he has noticed that influencers are releasing fragrances that they had really, frankly, almost nothing to do with as far as creative direction goes. Harsh words indeed. Releasing pre-existing fragrances that were already done and telling you they creatively directed these, he claims. Now, he's not mentioning any names, so there's no legal issue here. He claims that there are multiple fragrances released this year that would fit under this, things that we've heard of, maybe associated with influencers on YouTube, and we've been told, yeah, I creatively directed this, but in fact, they were kind of off the shelf. People have fragrances that are being created already, and they've just picked one out and said, yeah, I'll put my name to that, no problem. So that's what he's alleging is happening. I don't find that surprising. I'm sure that does go on. I would kind of say, to be honest with you, let's take an example. Way back in the day, the fragrance which eventually came out as Issey Miyake L'Eau d'Essai Pour Homme, one of the fragrances submitted for that brief that they put out there, the Issey Miyake company, eventually got taken up by Creed and was Silver Mountain Water. So this does happen in the bigger fragrance world. The niche and designer brands do this too. So is it such a terrible thing that someone somewhere might select a pre-existing brand, a fragrance, and say, this is my fragrance, I'm putting my name to it? If people like Creed do it, and the L'Eau d'Essais and whoever of this world, is it so bad? I guess the problem is if they're kind of getting you to invest very personally in them on a small level as an influencer, that you really like them, and telling you they were actually involved in the conception and the imagining of how this fragrance should smell, and it's not true, that could be a problem. But I'm just saying, this ain't nothing new, that sometimes there's a pre-existing fragrance, and even big designer brands will say, that will do, we'll take that. It does happen. Okay, he says his knowledge now is enhanced by the fact that he's been approached, Gents, by brands to do this type of stuff. And they've said to him, you can just come physically and, beg your pardon, try some pre-existing fragrances, pick one, and you can just say you creatively directed it, he alleges. And in fact, he chose not to do this, to his credit. But he says 2 months later, one of the ones that he was offered, he saw someone else had actually released that and said they creatively directed it. This doesn't surprise me. I think that's probably true, and that does happen. I don't think it's the greatest crime in the world. There is a mild element of exaggeration of how much the influencer had to do with creating this fragrance. In fact, if they picked it off the shelf, then it already existed. Well, it's kind of nothing, isn't it? So, it's not perfect, but I don't think it's like shock horror. I can't believe this. Do you find this surprising? I don't. It goes on. I don't think it's crime of the century. Many other influencers who talk about current affairs also plug their coffee brand, and I'm sure they didn't really have much to do with picking which kind of Colombian or Algerian or Venezuelan beans went into the coffee. I don't know. It's business is business. What do you expect? But yeah, okay. So he's also said there are people doing it under the influencer's own brand name. So these instances where you would release it under the name of Company X, and it would be in conjunction with Frankie Fragrance or whoever it might be. I don't know if there's a Frankie Fragrance, not alleging him. But he says now there's also websites called, there's one called scentcraft.com, and one called Scentmate, which only operates in Europe, Firmenish subsidiary, apparently that. And there's a kind of quiz, and you go on there, and they just say, do you want masculine, do you want feminine, do you want to be day or night fragrance, and pick a few notes out. And within 3 business days, AI is also apparently involved, God knows. You've got your sample in the post, and apparently it seems like some of the fragrance influencers may be working in conjunction with these type of sites to release their fragrance too. I'm not sure quite the business details of how that then works out, but the problem for him then is, when he creates his fragrances, and I must say it was the same for us, it took, best part of a year to send a brief to our perfumer, the great established English perfumer, John Stephen, and then he would, he doesn't drop everything, as Gents was saying, and just make the perfume. He's a busy man, and it takes a few weeks or months before he even starts work on it, and then he'll be doing that in conjunction with all the other things he does, and then he'll send us 4 or 5 variations, and we might say, we'll take that one, or we might say, well, none of them were quite what we're looking for, as we have done with one, and go back and forth, and it takes months and months to kind of maybe arrive at the right one. And that's how it kind of should be with the creation of a perfume. So it is alarming maybe if a influencer is going out there and saying, oh, wow, look at this incredible fragrance I've creatively directed, but they just went through a quick quiz that any idiot could do and got their sample 3 days later. And that was, I get his point there. I get his point. What do you think about that? I don't know which influencers allegedly have done this, but I know that it probably is true that all of this stuff, and maybe worse, does go on in the YouTube world. Nothing surprises me. So to summarize, when it comes to influencer brands, anything in influencer brand that you see out there, whether it's fragrance or any other genre out there, we have influencers who create their own wristwatch in the wristwatch community with bigger brands. We have all, there may be a moisturizing setup that someone's created in conjunction with this, beauty company. It does happen. And the question is, how much were they really involved? How much of an expert are they in being able to actually create a fragrance? Or are they just kind of putting their face to any old thing? And I've got to be honest, there are degrees of this where it's, from my brand where I actually own or co-own the company, involved from the very beginning. No one can really say that it's not legit. And there are also things where you have a pre-existing company working with an influencer, but the influencer may be intimately involved talking to the perfumer. And then you have things where people might just bang their name on any old thing because it's easy. I've got to be honest with you, I don't think this is the crime of the century, but I do think it's an interesting discussion. I think Gents is interesting because he's a bit of a maverick. I don't think he's like chums with all the other YouTubers. We're all a bit lone wolfy and we've all got our egos, but he's probably ruffled a few feathers. I'm sure some of the other people who haven't been named but may have been doing the things he's talking about aren't too thrilled with him doing that. And what do you think about him doing that? Is it shots fired at other influencers? Is it implicitly certain other influencers? Are some people aware of who he really means? I don't know. What's his beef? Mind you, I do respect him. Great channel, huge hard work, great success. And you know what? Hats off to him for not just being totally bland and sometimes addressing things. He talked about how sometimes people get sent free bottles from big companies, but you don't get no more free bottles if you make even the mildest criticism. And that could have, harmed his business model maybe if he wanted to get loads of free stuff from brands or work with brands. People said, he's a bit too much of a maverick. He doesn't always play the game. So he does have a bit of integrity there, and I got to respect that. So what do you think about Gents? What do you think about his video? I'll put the link to the video in the description of this one. I'd love to know your thoughts and on the whole influencer thing. One fragrance, just so you get some fragrance info out of this video. If you're looking for a great cheapie, which is a kind of barbershop style fragrance, kind of an aromatic fougere with a sporty twist, Azzaro Pour Homme L'Eau, a flanker to the 1978 release, 2003 I think, actually quite close to Rive Gauche Pour Homme, now sadly discontinued from Yves Saint Laurent, like a sports flanker to that. Really fresh lavender anise barbershop citrus fragrance. Great freshy for the upcoming spring. Let me know what you think about that in the comments down below. Please subscribe if you've enjoyed the video, or even if you didn't. Maybe the next one will be better. It could hardly be any worse. My wristwatch of the day is the Omega, and this is a late 80s quartz 40mm Seamaster, sometimes known as the pre-Bond Omega. I love the dial design on that 40mm version. Guys, we will leave it there. See you in the next video. Remember, whatever you're doing in life, let's project. And although sometimes life may stink, at least we can always smell good. Bye-bye.